Sauvignon Blanc Semillon is a classic style. So you're going to have all price points. And then the ones at the top, like this, they're just glorious wines. We're pouring at the restaurant, at the winery, at the Biodynamic Wine Room, we're calling it now. We're pouring the 2010 Sauvignon Blanc Semillon from Cullen Diana, and it is so fresh. Yeah. But the other thing that's tied in this that's made such a difference is the screw cap.
Yep.
Because if you go back for our 40th, we went back and went through everything, and then last year again from the 30th year of winemaking again, and the wines that would have been great that aren't because of the cork is just a tragedy. So now we have these wines under screw cap. They've been under screw cap since 2002. Mm-hmm. We can really get a mapping of the quality of the vintage and the wine in a real way. That's not to do with the quality of the cork.
I'm amazed by the sort of bright, lacy acidity that this wine's showing right now. Given its age, you wouldn't expect it to be showing that. So clearly it's a trend, and you're definitely on the crest of that trend of creating aromatics in this way in Australia. And it's wonderful to get a chance to check it out. It's fantastic.
Yeah, and the 16 was a very aromatic harvest. So it was like it's very beautiful to be able to have that individual representation of harvest in a wine which you wouldn't expect in that way, and very beautiful. And because there's no additions, it's actually obviously other than the oak and the sulfur dioxide, it's very pure to source of where it comes from. So I love the Cullen Vineyard Sauvignon Blanc Semillon. It's one of my favourites of ours. And it's once people taste it, they go, because it's not what the Mangan Vineyard is, what people would expect with the Sauvignon Blanc Semillon, because it's unoaked and it's very crunchy and bright and fresh. But the Cullen is more interesting in that way that it has that minerality and that structure and that acidity and that line which just drives right through, and you'll get that softening as it gets older. But I just love seeing them as older wines. And we've got the Sauvignon Blanc and Semillon are on, for the most part, on a lie trellis. I did my a stage in New Zealand with Richard Smart, and we did trellis experimentation. So I brought that back in the 1983 back to the winery, and we started experimenting with the Sauvignon Blanc to be able to give the vineyard, the vines, more surface area to grow on, particularly seeing we're interested in using less chemicals or no chemicals. So that started then, and it was really very clear that with more surface area and more light coming in, that with the Mediterranean maritime climate of the region, that we the fruit quality was better. And so we converted all of our Sauvignon Blanc and Semillon mostly to the lie trellis, which is a horizontally divided trellis, or to the Scott Henry trellis. But in both cases, it's a bigger area for the wine to grow on, because Sauvignon Blanc and Semillon, of course, are very vigorous and very strong in their personality in terms of how they grow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. Shall we move on to the Diane Madeleine now?
Yeah, great. Well, the multi-award winning, the 99 pointer.
Fantastic.
Yes. And we're pretty chuffed to be awarded by Hugh and Hook, the best winery in Australia, last week.
We got that note from Kelvin. It's just an incredible achievement.
It is. It's hard to actually. But anyway, I asked Hugh, and he said, "Look, the wines are really great." And he was talking about, the 18 Diana Madeleine and the Kevin John, which are the ones that we just sent to him. So 18 was I don't think we've had any bad vintages in Margaret River. Personally, they're just different, and they have different styles. Mm-hmm. But the 18 certainly was a year where we had even temperatures during ripening, and we didn't have any, big weather events during flowering. So we had good yields. It's one of those dream harvests, really. And the 18 Diana Madeleine, came as a part of that. It has incredible poise as a wine. So, 79% Cabernet Sauvignon. It's coming off those, the vines that are, on Scott Henry trellis. I think that's a key part of red wine quality, is to have that, the fine tannins have to be there. And this wine has this incredible sort of,
a sense of calm and resolution about the wine. And for one that's so young, that's unusual.
Yes.
I opened mine at 4:00, and then I thought, no, it's way too long. I should have waited. and it's presenting so wonderfully well. It's actually quite deceptive. If I had this in a blind, the fruit would make me think it's young, but the resolution would make me think it's far older. And it's really extraordinarily evolved. How do you see this tracking from a maturation point of view?
Oh, it'll just be young for a long while. I think it's very beautiful wine because of its perfume and because of the detail that you can see in it. I think that's the thing. I mean, there's a lot of tannin in there, but they're all really great tannins.
It's
so
refined tannin, though. There's plenty of tannin. Yeah. It's so glossy and finely etched. Very impressive.
And this wine actually epitomizes what I was saying about physiological ripeness at lower alcohol, because it's only 13% alcohol, and yet there is nothing in that wine that is out of place. And you'd think it might be riper because it's so smooth and silky, and that's part of the vintage character, I think. And of course, the old vines, a lot of things in there. But I know this wine from history of looking at our wines, because you always underestimate the aging capacity of them. You can go back to 1977, and we've got about 4 bottles left now, and the wines are still young.
Really?
And those wines were, they were made without knowledge of anything, and and so I know these wines under screw cap, how they're looked after. I mean, it's a little bit humbling when you go back that far and the wines are still young if you get a good bottle with cork. But I know these wines have that same pedigree of the vineyard, and to be able to look after the vineyard with the biodynamics and then have these wines, there's no doubt in my mind that they're going to go for 30 to 40 years without a doubt. And yet you have them now and they're delicious.
Because the Bordelais can only wish to have a similar experience. We sell a lot of vintage Bordeaux, and I'm at a point now where I'm reluctant to do anything older than 90, 94, 95 out of Bordeaux. Just too tricky. And I think a lot of that is to do with cork, of course, but I think it's also, as you say, it's all about in the winery and how it's developed and nurtured from the beginning. I think that's the
and that physiological ripeness and the health of the soils and the vines, is you get that with organic and biodynamic wines. And if the vineyard is pushed to a different crop or whatever, you're going to get a different wine, because you're going to have to manipulate it. So therefore, the minute you start manipulating, you actually lose something. So the purer the line from the vineyard to the glass, and I do believe that it is a great home for Cabernet Sauvignon in the Margaret River, and particularly, in the Williabra sub-region, which hopefully we'll get our GI through soon. We're all praying. It's not about saying it's better. It's just saying that it's different, and identifying those places that are, and honouring that place that has, there's the place which makes the great wine. And it's much more interesting if you have differences rather than everything being the same. And you get the classic characters in this wine of Cullen, and of course Williabra, you get the violets and the roses, as the floral note, and then you get the mulberry and the plum, and you get the bitter chocolate as you're coming through, and that bitter chocolate is really what drives the food matching capacity for Cabernet Sauvignon, and then you have that ironstone, that iodine C character, and it's just this incredible sort of beautiful pull, a tension between savoury and sweet that makes it such a great food wine. And people say, oh, I don't like Cabernet Sauvignon, because they're probably thinking about 16% alcohol, thick things that are all tannin, but you get the beauty of the perfume and balance in this. It's like there's nothing better. It's amazing.
Well, it's been such a treat in the last 60 days or so to talk to so many winemakers from around the world, and I tell you, there's a few things that emerge from all of them in unison. First thing is, don't mess with it. Leave it alone as much as you can. The other thing is, try as much as you can to be dictated by what the vineyard wants rather than what your consumer wants. I think the days of creating something with a destination in mind are gone from the top producers. They far more sync with what nature is demanding. And the other thing everybody has said to us, because obviously these are largely tastings from commercial release wines, they often say that if you're tasting something young and you're impressed with it at a young stage, it's going to be that way, that manifest different characteristics in 10 or 15 years. But a good young wine is always a good old wine. It seems to
Correct.
be that you can pick up and acknowledge from the beginning and all the way through the experience.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, that's right.
The one thing I wanted to acknowledge that, I'm so interested in carbon neutrality. It's fascinating to see that you're now carbon positive, which is really another step forward in that way of thinking and that sense of wisdom. And is it something that a lot of the wineries are pursuing?
Look, I think more are. I think there's more wineries. I think the use of synthetic chemicals on the land is the worst thing, because you stop 50% of carbon sequestration when you do that. The liquid carbon sequestration stops. So that's the most important, apart from the cancer causing attributes of it. So that's really good that that's starting to happen. Is that particularly Margaret River, there's more people going organic. The climate change isn't, it's starting a little bit now, but it isn't something that's been addressed by the Australian wine industry. I think, I always just say to people, wow, it's so amazing. When we tested our soils, was how we got to find out we're carbon positive, was that we thought in the carbon neutral, they say that the vineyard is neutral, because what comes and goes, so there's nothing. And we were thinking, with our cover crops and the carbon cycling, I reckon there's going to be, so we had it tested over 6 years for actually how much carbon was being held in the soil. Yeah. And it was some sort of world record, it was like of how much our soils, which are these ancient soils, which you wouldn't think would. Yeah. So I think it'd be a really, and then it comes into the whole thing of, business ethics, and, all businesses really should have some ethic with respect to the climate. And I know that there's a big push in business now for people to have those credentials before going forwards. And looking at what's happening with the climate, I think it's probably the most important thing is to look after the earth at this point in time. Yeah. So that we have, for future generations, an earth that we can inhabit. Yeah. So yeah, I think this would, it would be one way to, as well as other things that are happening, one way to, plant more plants, and just every business have that part of, I don't want to give people a political lecture, but I am a bit, but it is so important. And I think it's changing now, and it's a good thing, but no, I don't really know that many people around here. I know that, Jeff Grossett and Stephanie Toole are in Clare Valley, but I don't know of anyone else. Yeah.
So if anybody at this point got any questions they want to put to Vanya? I have one or two. Yeah, please go ahead, Chris.
So thank you, Vanya, for joining us. Really interesting. I actually am running a comparison here between the 18 with this nice new clean label and an 05 that I have. And one of the things I noticed, lots of differences about the wine and where they are, but also the 05 is in a green bottle, and you've transitioned to kind of a brownish purpley looking bottle. And I wonder what there's something that drives the change.
Yeah, it's a great question. In fact, I forgot to talk about that. So yeah, it's we wanted to I suppose upgrade the Diana Madeleine, and so with the Vanya label, it's got in an amber colour bottle. We love the brown bottle, and so we've just when we first, Ashley Jones first, the artist first did the Oakleaf and Acorn label, he wanted the label to be like it was in the 2018, that there wasn't the technology available for that. So with our graphic designer, he said, well, we can do the 18 Diana Madeleine, we can do the Diana Madeleine now too. So we thought that would be great, and particularly in such a great vintage, to actually bring that the actual artwork is very much like the original etching to the bottle, and to keep the same bottle but to change it to the brown coloured bottle. We felt would be just a way to sort of subtly just bring the label into the modern era, because it's a little bit great vintages, by the way, you've chosen to drink. 05,
They're both
18,
going down
yeah.
well.
Yeah.
The change in the color of the glass is not about improved technology or anything like that. It sounds like you've made mostly a aesthetic decision. Okay.
Yeah, totally. No, it's 100% aesthetic. Yeah, yeah. But they do say that brown glass protects the wine better, but then the wine never goes out of the box. It's in terms of UV light, I think. But no, it was aesthetic choice. Yeah. So that bottle was actually made for, we got that bottle made just for the Diana Madeleine in that colour. Yeah.
Okay.
So,
James,
yeah.
you had a question as well? Yep, James.
Thanks for asking that.
Hi, it's John here actually with James. Vanya, thanks so much for today. Really interesting to hear more about the wines. So one thing I've also enjoyed some of the older vintages of Cullen. I just wonder where you see the optimal window for when the wine hits its peak. You mentioned obviously some of the older wines are still fantastic. Where do you see that kind of optimal kind of aging?
Yeah, it's a good question. I find it whenever a wine is good for drinking, it's good, it's optimal. But these wines will age, 30 to 40 years. So it's really up to you as to what type of age you feel like drinking. Like sometimes you feel like drinking a younger wine, and then other times you really want to have a wine with a little bit more grace and secondary aging characteristics. So I know that all of them, except for cork, the influence of cork will be go that distance. But I would say to people, if you buy a dozen, have one when it's, unless you just feel like drinking all of it, you can buy some more, that's good too. Have a bottle when it's first opened, then 5 years, 10 years, and you just enjoy it. There's no rules. It really just is when and to observe and find that interesting. And the other interesting thing I always find is around the biodynamic calendar of what day you drink on. It's like we've just gone from a fruit day into a leaf day today, so it's like the wines were open and they're closing down. So that's another interesting way to look at wines and how they taste as well. So it's really about observation and enjoyment. And it's just like you go down to your cellar and you find a wine, you think, oh, wonder what that tastes like, and even for myself, we opened a 2010 for a tasting the other day, and I hadn't had the 2010 Diana Madeleine for a little while, and it just looked terrific, but it was still just so young, and I thought, well, that's great, enjoy that with had it for dinner, and so it's, yeah, I just think that knowing that they will age, you've got the opportunity to taste them over a long period of time, but you need the bottles.
Anybody else?
Great questions, you guys. Thanks so much. Yeah.
Anybody else?
Yeah, quick question for me, Robert.
Yeah, great.
It's been super interesting. Been a pleasure of visiting a winery in the Margaret River. I know, about 15 years ago. I'd love to be able to
wonderful. Yeah.
Beautiful part of the world. I'm just curious about, and I'd love to understand more about the winery. So, away with the wine for the name, Diana Madeleine. Where did it actually come from? You might have said it before, I don't know, but they'd be interested to understand.
No, it's a great question. Diana Madeleine was my mother. So I worked with Mum and Kevin John was my father. And I worked with my mother for, 25 years. And she loved red wine better than anything. So, and she introduced Cabernet Franc and Merlot and, Cabernet Franc and Merlot into the region, because she loved the Bordeaux blend. And we just thought she would never allow us to put, I think we did a couple for the American market, but would never allow us to put her name on the label. So when she passed away, it just happened to be the 2001 vintage, which is one of the great vintages, and she wanted to stay alive to drink it in 2 years' time. But really, that wine's still going strong. So that was when the 2001 was the first Diana Madeleine that was released, and it's the same wine as the Cabernet Merlot that was released before that. But yeah, it's great, and I think a lot of people are comparing the 2018 to the 2001. I think the two they're similar, but a little bit different in terms of just with the biodynamics and the way we're making them. The 2001's an amazing wine, but a little bit more, if you like, old-fashioned. In the way that Australian red wines were made at that time, but this is more like really old-fashioned because it's really ancient winemaking.
Incredibly taunt and athletic. It's a beautiful wine. I'm really excited to have it. Just to get some last marketing, we have 7 bottles left, And that's the end of the news. That's as much as we were able to get from this vintage. And they're on the website if anybody wants to nail them. I've had to go begging for extra bottles just to cover tonight's offering. Anyone else with another question?
Hey, Robert, I have a question. Logan.
Hey, mate. Welcome.
Hey, Vanya, thank you very much for sharing more about Cullen wines. You know, my wife and I were supposed to visit your vineyard probably a few weeks ago, but we had to cancel the trip. Hopefully in the future. But I'm glad this today.
I'll still be there. Yeah.
So my question, Vanya, is, you know, you talked about switching to biodynamics a while ago, but really to really see the result on the final product on the wines, how long does it take? Just understand the patience, and how much patience do you need to see the impact?
Yeah, they say it takes 12 years before you see the full impact. Yeah. Oh, no, 9 years, sorry. And we've been doing it for 12 years. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, we're a little bit different situation because we're minimal chemical input to organic to biodynamic. But I think the biodynamic, you can really see that now in the 18 and also in the 17 Diana Madeleine. You know, those wines, they're really very complete. And, you know, the fruit that's coming in, and it's across the board with all the wines, that sense of that completeness. 2019 and 20 were very low yielding vintages. They've got, you know, lots of concentration. So it's just wonderful to see that yeah, when we went biodynamic in 2004, it really wasn't a particularly fashionable thing to do. And there was a lot of pushback at some levels. And I was so excited about it. I sort of branded as biodynamic and went out there, and our sales actually dropped. So we went back and rebranded as, you know, the best wine quality with a sustainable tag, and things were okay. But I think it's changing now. People are, you know, it's a wonderful thing to actually live through that whole change of people understanding that, you know, it's not good to put nerve gas on the land, you know, for people or for the land or the plants. And so that's essentially what it is, you know, poison. So it's a really wonderful thing to see that shift, that more and more people are wanting to have, you know, chemical-free wines, but it has been a long push and a long hard work, and it still is hard work too. Yeah, you know, it's not easy.
Anybody else?
Thank you.
I have one more question.
I have a question. Sorry, Robert. Hi, Vanya. Thanks for the time. 2 questions. My wife was asking whether you guys use animals on the vineyard, like sheep and such, during the wine growing season. And second question was, are you experimenting with any new blends and new varietals that we can look forward to?
Well, we did experience. We looked at sheep, but what happened with sheep was that they ate all the good grasses and left the weeds behind. Which smart sheep. So we went back to just doing we put in a cover crop in the mid row, and then we can dig up the Kaiku, which is our strongest weed, with undivide weeder. And yeah, so that's the first question. Is we don't do any anymore. We used to. Are we doing any new wines? We're always looking at different styles. We have, of course, the classics, but you know, if there's a wine that particularly stands out, we will, you know, have a look at it and see whether it's worthwhile. I think we do a little bit of pet nat some years. We'd make an amber wine, which is quite new. That's our orange wine. I think Kelvin might have a little bit of the 17, which is a gorgeous wine. Yeah. So that whole aspect of supernatural wines, if you like. I mean, all of our wines are natural wines because we don't add anything to them. And that, you know, my definition of a chemical wine is no chemicals on the land or in the winery. So I think all of our wines are natural, but the sort of supernatural wines like the amber, which is a white wine made like a red wine, the skin fermented, and then put into oak with no sulfur, and then bottled with a very low sulfur regime. Gorgeous expression of Sauvignon, Blanc, Semillon. And we've learned a lot through making that wine about how much skin contact for the traditional dry white styles. And they're very ancient styles. They contain the whole harvest in their in themselves rather than just a small amount of skin contact time. So that the amber is a gorgeous style. We make a little bit of preservative-free wine for those people that can't have any sulfur dioxide. But having said that, we have to call it PF because all wines have sulfur dioxide because the yeast makes sulfur dioxide, and all of our wines have low sulfur dioxide levels because they have to have below 100 parts for the biodynamic certification. Then we sort of are making, we made a little bit of moon opposite Saturn wines. We're looking at what with our legacy series, Kevin John, we looked at the influence of biodynamic artisanal events like harvest days, biodynamic barrels. We're doing a lot of biodynamic barrels now too, which means the wood is harvested on a biodynamic fruit or flower day, then every aspect of the barrel's making is on that. And we're finding we're getting a really nice influence in that on the fruit and flower days. That we're also we've done an egg harvest. The Kevin John Legacy wine we've got now is an egg harvest, egg ferment in concrete egg with puncheons. Then we do, of course, the Vanya was sort of an experimental wine with the amphora, having the length of time on skin to the Cabernets. We love the amphora. This Diana Madeleine has got a little bit of amphora wine in it, extend the skin contact time. So we've learned from those, everything that we do, we learned from in how we can make a better quality wine and bring in that texture and texture's the word for all of our wines to have, and that length and that minerality. So is there any new wines coming? There's always a potential for new wines to come. I think the amber is the biggest addition in terms of it being part of the permanent portfolio. It is the wine that is most sensitive to vintage, because having skin contact whites is you have to really be careful with how you choose the fruit. But yeah, it's always something that we're looking at. But I love those also, those upper end artisanal wines which are harvested on one day. They have some aspect which is unrepeatable again ever, and that's sort of in the moment winemaking, which we do because we don't have a recipe. So it's interesting to see what will be next. Yeah.
I have on the question of sulfides, Vanya. I get to ask this question a lot because people react. I think people flush when they drink wine, etc. And my answer to the question normally is, well, I'm flushed all the time because it can't possibly be because I'm drinking. It must be the sunshine. But my usual answer is that it's the sulfides, and organic wine not having that level of sulfide is the thing that allows people to drink it with a lot more, or not being concerned about this aspect.
Yeah, I certainly get people saying they don't get sick from our wines, but I wouldn't ever want to say to someone if they're allergic to wine, to drink it, they won't have a reaction. But we do have a lot of people say that, particularly our red wines, they say that they have no problem with drinking it. And certainly the lower sulfur dioxide wines like the ambers and the PF having no additions at all, it does make a big difference. I think the sulfur dioxide, even though they're low, it also changes the expression of the wine. In some ways, it's just another style of wine when there's no or very low sulfur dioxide addition.
All right, well, I think that gets us to the end of it. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Come and join us again when the next release comes out. Love to taste your Field Day Chardonnay. It's one of my absolute favorites. It would be fantastic to be able to show it.
Actually, Vanya, I have one question for you, and that is, when Rob and I sort of started this business in Singapore, the Grand Cru family were coming through Singapore, and they're all in the corner huddled, and Robert and I, being the unsophisticated Antipodeans, walked over to Madame Rothschild and said, "When you're not drinking your own wine, Madame, what wine do you drink?" And she was quick to say, "We're drinking Margaret River." Now, this is 2004. So the question for you is, what do you drink when you're not drinking your own wine?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, anything that's good. And that's a very Australian answer, isn't it? I mean, it really does. It really does depend, you know, it does depend on what you're feeling like. If it's a hot summer's day, you know, you could be drinking, you know, a Riesling from Alsace, or a, you know, Pinot Gris, or a you know, Grand Cru Burgundy or something. But you know, if it's a wintry day, you know, you'd be having a different experience. I do love DRC, but I don't get to drink it very often. But I love Riesling. You know, I think I wouldn't be a very good Riesling maker, but you know, I love having, you know, that it's a really different kind of personality to drinking Margaret River wine, and those sort of things. Champagne, you know, biodynamic champagnes I love too. Just having that feeling of those wines that are made with that ethos. So it's endless, actually. I mean, I wouldn't want to pinpoint any one particular person or place, but it's always interesting to look at different styles and how people are doing things differently. But I definitely won't drink bad wine.
Okay, well, on that note, Chris, I know you're having the 05, we're having the 04.
Oh wow, you guys, that's incredible.
So cheers, thank you very much.
As well.
Thank you. Thanks so much,
everybody.
guys.
We'll be in touch.
Bye.
We have Keith Mugford from Mosswood, who's agreed to do a similar tasting with us. What I'll do, because we've got super limited stock of the current release, is I'll be inviting all of you guys to join that ahead of marketing it to the general database. So I'll be in touch in a couple of weeks with a note about that. But thank you so much, and we'll be in touch. Enjoy.
Thank you. Bye. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
What a hard work, Patty Crew.